Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to this week's installment of Coffee Chats. I'm here with the ever iconic Mackenzie Finklea.
Hey, party people.
Yeah, so this week, over the past few coffee chats, we've really been trying to emphasize talking to different authors from different genres about how they've navigated marketing and sort of cultivating their own brands in relation to genre expectations. So we've talked to fiction authors, we've talked to nonfiction authors, we've talked to poets, and this week we get to talk to memoirists. So we're super, super excited about that. And without further ado, allow us to introduce you to our wonderful panelists. Hello.
Hello, everybody.
Hi.
So, why don't our panelists introduce themselves? Travis, would you like to start?
Sure, I'll kick it off. So, my name's Travis Sackett. I am the author of My Life with Karma. I'm also a columnist for Recovery Today magazine. So, my memoir is about recovery from addiction. And that's basically where I'm going to leave it. I'll let Nicole introduce herself.
Thanks, Travis. Hi, my name is Nicole Spindler. I am the author of Beyond Life's Moments, which is a memoir about my dad's 10-year battle with an extremely rare form of cancer, as well as also I am the author of my second book coming out in 3 weeks, which is a realistic fiction novel titled The Reason Why. So yeah, I'll kind of leave it there too. That way I don't spoil too many details. So.
Very excited for that upcoming book, Nicole.
Thanks.
All right, everybody. Well, go for it.
Oh, no. You're 100% fine. I was just going to say, I think that the fact that you have a second book that's about realistic fiction, that'll add further nuance to some of the answers you'll have to our questions. So,
totally.
Without further ado, our first question is, how, especially because you guys are coming from a place of writing memoirs and cultivating your own stories, how did you navigate determining your audience? And what did it mean for you to determine the balance between your niche and having a more general appeal? Again, because you're sharing real stories from your own life.
Sure. I can take that one right off the bat. So basically, right away, I knew my audience was going to be people in recovery and people that had struggled with addiction. But with that being said, I didn't want to just be limited to that audience. So in my book, I also wrote about rescuing a dog. I rescued her in the heart of my addiction, and basically, I felt like including that story in my memoir and kind of weaving her story throughout would open it up to a greater audience, because let's be real, who doesn't love dogs, especially rescue dogs? And I was like, it will touch people's hearts. So that's what I did to kind of break it open and really bring more people into the fold.
And for me specifically, I actually think I had a hard time determining my audience for my first book because I felt like it was almost too broad. I kind of went that route of like, oh, well, it's my story. Anyone could benefit from it. It has life lessons. But I would say, though, I think the question that I asked myself actually when I was trying to determine my audience is, if I was to give this book to kind of like I envisioned myself giving it to my younger self, like, would that benefit me? So I kind of, especially since I wrote it during the time when it covers the time when I was like a freshman in high school all the way until I graduated from college. So kind of even looking at like the timeline of my story, as well as also kind of going back and be like, when do I feel like I wish I had these lessons like ready and in my toolkit? That really helped me to kind of pinpoint where my audience was. And then I expanded it just in general, just niche stories as well. I focused on a lot of cancer survivors. I focused also on family members who just even opened it up to families who just have undergone very like traumatic events as well.
So often we'll talk to authors and we'll ask them, who do you want to read your book? What's your target audience? And oftentimes I get the same answer, which is, oh, I want everyone to read my book. Well, of course we do. But my follow-up question for you guys is, why does determining an audience matter?
I think right away for marketing reasons. I mean, because you need to know who you're really planning on reading your book, like overall. And it's really hard to market without knowing that. Because if you're just going to blast it out there to the world, and how do you kind of, I guess, balance what your return is going to be? It's very difficult to determine that. So by kind of tearing it down and selecting an audience right off the bat, you know, these are the people that I'm going to go for readers right away. This is like my A group. And then you can kind of determine what your subgroups are after that and how you want to market to them. That was my approach, at least.
And that matters too, because you don't want to just like give it to people who don't necessarily want to read it.
Exactly. Especially too when you think about things further down the line, like reviews. I mean, you don't necessarily just want to blast people with your book. And then if they're like, well, this is nothing, I was expecting, let's say, true crime, and here I get a recovery memoir. It's like, it isn't a good fit. So
that would be false advertising.
Exactly. Thank you. Yeah, that's what I was looking for.
I mean, I'll piggyback off of that, just expand a little bit more, not just on the marketing, but like, I feel like it also helps to establish like your purpose and your impact behind the book. Because like, I think that was something that really helped me kind of figure out, especially because I ended up through my book, like a lot of people wanted to hear my, not everyone wants to hear a memoir story, like, and that's why you have to create, you don't want to always publicize. Nobody always wants to hear stories like that, like on your personal, like Instagram, Facebook account. So like, that's why it's important to create your own author stuff. But I found though, like, it really helped me to establish like my purpose and the drive behind my book, because, and I noticed it played out in how my messages continued into speaking events and or spreading my message, across, in interviews and stuff like that. So I think it helped me to really confirm, like what my purpose was behind my book and driving the impact behind it as well.
I have a follow-up question for you guys. A follow-up to the follow-up, if you will. So we're talking a little bit about, like, so Mackenzie asked a very astute question of why does determining an audience matter, especially as you gain a sense of direction for what your marketing is meant to look like. Since your memoirs have been out in the world, has your audience evolved in a way you didn't expect it to?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. Right away, mine definitely did, because I also wrote about mental health. So mental health and addiction kind of go hand in hand at times, but one or the other often gets overlooked. Once my book was out in the world, I had a ton of people reach out to me, talking about things like suicide, things that I never really intended. They were addressed in the book, but it wasn't that like key highlight. So it was like, wow, okay, all of a sudden people are picking out these parts that are important to them that I may have overlooked as an author, or I thought, okay, these are important enough to be in the book, but not necessarily the things that are going to hit home and really touch the hearts of people. And all of a sudden it did. And it's like, okay, wow, this is a whole new audience I didn't think I'd have.
It happened to me too. Yeah, 100%. 100%. Like, I had a lot of people reach out to me because my book mostly talks about and shares stories about related to like, open heart surgery, like, surviving a car crash, like, or cancer. Like, I kind of focus a little bit more like on the traumatic. I focus even on like, family dynamics and stuff like that, like abusive kind of like household stuff like that. But I remember a lot of people reached out to me when my book was published and, explaining that they used their book to help someone who, grieve, like just with a passing. Like, I never thought of that, or a recent divorce. Or I even had someone reach out to me and say like their daughter like didn't get into like the top 2 or 3 schools that they wanted in college. And she was very, but she still got, she was still doing good, like academically, but she was really like her self-doubt and like confidence just dropped. So they wanted to reach out for my book. And like, they even asked like, yeah, do you think your lessons are applicable like to, this? And, and then they ended up sharing like how it like really helped her kind of like see it in a more positive light, take a spin on it. So I feel like more and more people have been coming to me and see, it's kind of a good thing. Like, they're criticizing your book, I feel like, in a good way, and be like, wow, like you started this wormhole, but it's a good wormhole because it sparks conversation, or leads to a second book or more articles and blogs. So I think it was like, it's a good thing that it kind of like expanded. So.
That's so wonderful. That's exactly what you want, right? You want people, I mean, you want people talking about your book, but the other thing too is you guys both almost basically answered a follow-up question that I had, which was memoir writers will often face the criticism of like, you have to be famous or have done something to write a memoir or to write your life story, right? I don't know if you guys have faced that criticism at all. And I guess my question was that you answered really was why write it if maybe you're not, you know, Michelle Obama, or how might you have faced that criticism?
I don't know if Travis, you've gotten this before, but I know going off of like, oh, like, why are you writing a memoir? I do get that. Like, aren't you pretty young to be writing a memoir? I get that a lot. And it's not like the way they phrase it is that it's like, aren't you a little young? Like they say it exactly like that. And like, it kind of bothered me at first. Like I was very miffed when someone asked me that because then I'm like, okay, well, just read my book then. Like I have a life story. I've had stuff happen to me. But I kind of like view it as a compliment because again, like it's the unexpected. Like people do assume like, oh, like a memoir is kind of like, you got to read like Barack Obama's, or you have to read like Matthew McConaughey's. Like they kind of view it as like, it's like your biography and everything like that. Or like, yeah, you have to be like a super well-known person. But so I think it kind of like I broke a bit, like we've been breaking barriers in terms of what a traditional memoir should look like. So, or who should be writing it.
Yes, I couldn't agree with you more. I get the same thing regarding my age. And the way that I kind of responded to that was there's so many people that are still out there struggling with addiction. I mean, that I wanted to write a book for those people that don't have a voice, the ones that are still in the streets, the ones that are still in rehab. And I really just wanted to put it out there because when I was struggling, I didn't find that book on the shelf. I looked for it and I didn't necessarily find one that spoke to me. So I wanted to fill that gap. And that's where I feel like my book came in. It just filled a gap that was needed.
And I can't resist it. I have to say this reference. I have to. Mackenzie knows. So as soon as Nicole said, "Aren't you a little young to be writing a memoir?" my mind instantly went to Phineas and Ferb. And Phineas Flynn always goes, "Yes, I am." Exactly. Like nothing should be holding you guys back from generating the change and the discourse that you want to see about topics that are really passionate, that really mean a lot to you and that you're passionate about. So I don't know. Like I feel like when I look at authors at large, I see memoirists as like the Phineas and Ferbs of the author ecosystem.
I think ultimately the question comes from a place of envy when people ask. It's like, well, why haven't you, Linda?
Yeah.
Get with the program, Susan.
All right, so we'll transition to our next planned question now that you guys were prepared for, which is how did you approach structuring your story, your life's story? Did you organize your thoughts by theme or in chronological order?
So I did a little bit of both. Basically, I storyboarded. I took an entire wall in a bedroom and laid it all out so I could see it because I had so much that I was just like, wow, I can't really approach this without breaking it down in some manageable way. So I did that way, but when I wrote it in chronological order. So basically, I had the themes, I knew what I wanted and where I wanted to put them. And then I started from childhood and worked from there. And it fell into place. And basically, as I needed them, I would go to my storyboard and literally take pieces off the wall and say, okay, this is what I'm writing today.
As for me, I had journals that were in chronological order that I took. And I was like, that was my intention from the beginning. I was like, okay, I'm going to just write my story, beginning to end. That's it. But then as I was writing, I realized that there was like, and I did more interviews of other people who went like undergone traumatic events. And then I realized like, okay, I literally just dug a hole. Like, I mean, like it's a beautiful hole, but like it's gonna lead to like something amazing. But like I just kept digging and like literally I had like literally sticky notes, spreadsheet. I felt like Sherlock Holmes, like uncovering like a mystery. I just needed like the red string tape just to pin it all together. But I uncovered like these themes, and then I realized that like I think kind of organizing it by themes is I mean, it's still, there was some chronological order to it, but the big bulk of it was kind of more based off themes. And I thought that was a little bit more suitable because I think it kind of dragged home at like my elevator pitch, my big idea for my book.
One of the toughest things about writing nonfiction or creative nonfiction, in the case of memoir falling into the latter category, is the research piece. But with memoir, I feel like one of the nice bonus parts is you've lived the research part. Exactly. You have it. It's there in your brain, or in the case of fortunate Nicole, you already did all the writing. It was there in your journals. And then you just connect the dots. I think that's wonderful. I say just. It's not easy, but...
I mean, to that end, I guess, to build off of what Mackenzie was saying, what does research look like? Because every once in a while, it's helpful to throw in a statistic or two. Like, particularly when it comes to data, how much of a role did additional research play in building out your stories?
I definitely had to be like careful because, and I tell this to other authors like I work with, but like I kind of call it like you kind of just want to sprinkle it in intentionally, because you don't want like, because again, like because memoir, creative nonfiction are very teetering, like you don't want the research to outshine your story or overtake. So like I found like usually like if I had any little bit of research, it was like, for example, like I defined my dad's cancer because it was like very rare. Like there's only was 1 of 10 people that ever had it. So I really like defined it, took some time to like explain the severity of it. So there was a lot of research there and a lot of references, but then I would just bring up like a relevant statistic connecting back to like, you know, mental health, self-care. I even just kind of quoted people like Brene Brown for vulnerability. So I kind of did a lot more like quotes, or just kind of more like that rather than statistics. But I was very intentional of not only what I used and how much, but like kind of like what their purpose was. So I definitely, so I found that I felt like I was tiptoeing a little bit, but then it ended up being, again, still beneficial to my story just to include those in it.
Gotcha. Yeah, with mine, typically what I would do was when I was really focused on a certain aspect of recovery, where I wanted to back it with a fact, that's where I would do the research, because I was like, okay, I want this point to drive home with my audience, but I also want it to come from a place other than just myself. So that's where the research part came in for me, was just like where, for example, I would talk about opioid addiction. I wanted stats about opioid addiction in the United States so that people could really say, okay, this is an epidemic, this is what occurred, and this is what's occurring today. So
how do you feel that those pieces added depth to your story? Those research pieces, those quotes?
For me, I think it added the ability for people to go do a little more research and to kind of take what I said and then to research it on their own and to say, okay, if I really want to become educated about this topic, even more than the memoir, I guess the memoir covers, here's a starting point. Here's where I can go and I can get the information and I can really kind of build a case from there. That's basically what it did for my readers.
Yeah, encouraging some critical thinking.
Exactly.
Kind of gave some variety also to my, and kind of broke up my writing as well. I think that was also kind of like a structural piece, but like I think it helped because it kind of broke it up very nicely. And yeah, I think a lot of people, I know a lot of people have reshared. Like I had like quotes that talked about like that mentioned my theme in the beginning of my chapters of those themes. And I can't tell you, like when people do share my book and stuff like that, or take pictures of it on like their story. Like they take a picture of that where it shows like the name of the title, like the theme, the quote that's not mine, it's from research, and then my story following it. So I think like a lot of people like that format, and I think that was like popular to see it again, like outside my story, stepping back, broader context, broader perspective on the topic.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and to that end, because you guys are sort of talking about navigating the balance between emphasizing and exploring your story, but also contextualizing it within broader discussions, how much of yourself do you incorporate into your brands? And how does the genre expectations of memoirs influence your work?
So basically, I am my brand, is what I discovered. Being a person in recovery and writing about recovery, all of a sudden that it's me. It's all encompassing. It's basically I am put on display for everyone to kind of not only learn from, but also to criticize. And that was something that I wasn't necessarily ready for right away until the reviews hit. And I was like, oh, wow, some of these are really personal, but my story is really personal. So it made sense in that matter that people would I guess directly like address me about my recovery. It makes sense. So basically how it influenced my work was I put so much of my story and myself into it that now when I'm telling people about my story, it's so natural. It helps in terms of being able to just relay what I put out in the book and then being able to recapture that in smaller segments when I'm talking to people about the book.
Yeah, I definitely feel like there's the saying of like you live and breathe your genre. I mean, we memoirists are living and breathing. They are the brand. So I think like and the thing is like I found one thing uncomfortable at first when I was like creating it was, I definitely wanted to like showcase like myself, but I'm not like a huge selfie person or like I don't usually like the camera on me a lot, but I did find that like I mean a lot of the posts that seemed to do really well was and kind of often was posts that just kind of showed like me not as an author, as like a human being, and even just vulnerable posts like just saying like I had a crappy day today, like I didn't get any writing done with, or even showing what else I do besides being an author. I think kind of coming, recognizing that you are human, like, you're still a work in progress, because that's what like memoirs are a lot about is, we're, recognizing that, putting ourselves out there in a very vulnerable place in our writing. And I think just being very open and transparent about that, not just through our writing and as authors, but as just a normal human being, I found a lot of people really lean into that. So that's why I do try to like often show my face like on my posts and stuff like that, or my, my marketing, as well as also like kind of sprinkle in a little bit more about like myself besides being an author, besides always reading and stuff like that too.
Yeah, I think I was really excited to ask you guys this particular question because, yeah, I mean, oftentimes, because we've had like similar discussions with authors from other genres, and they were sort of talking about like, yes, the genre expectation of world building. Yes, the genre expectation of like responding to all of this research. And to Mackenzie's point, there is like a caliber, like memoirs don't have anything to hide behind. Like there's a caliber of vulnerability that is demanded of you guys. So I was just really curious if like how much of yourself you feel you need to lay out for people in a way that I guess this is hide behind sounds cowardly. It's not cowardly. It's just like it's more just like a different way of curation or a different way of presenting one's brand.
Yeah, I was going to add,
it
sounds like curatorial work, right? Like how much do you share? You obviously don't share everything, and you start with when I was born and every second thereafter.
I definitely like, for me, and again, it's a very hard line, but like, even though I write like a lot about write memoirs, like I don't really talk about like my other family members. I think that's one big thing is I don't bring in like my sibling. I don't bring in like even my parents a whole lot. Even though my dad's central to the story, like I don't even bring him up that often. But one thing that I lean into, I was gonna say I even have other day job. I don't really bring that into the picture just because it doesn't relate to writing. But I think the one big thing, and I think Kyra and Mackenzie knows a lot about me, but one thing I bring into my writing very heavily and on my like marketing that is very personal to me is just my love for Pittsburgh and my hometown. So like I think that's like really transparent. And that's totally fine. Like, you know, people know that like that's my hometown, like it's like my favorite place in the whole world. But yeah, I feel like I am very careful and with regards to how I'm sharing, especially those like that I mentioned in my book, whether by name or by not, I'm very careful bringing them up in any related marketing points. Yeah.
That makes sense. I changed a few names and things throughout mine just to protect other people. That was something that I looked at because I'm like, wow, I do not want to name drop someone and have them not be comfortable with what I wrote in my memoir. So that was something that I did to really just protect the identities of the people that were in my life, either at the time or currently.
Yeah, fiction writers have the benefit of that little blurb at the beginning that say any characters in this novel bear no resemblance to the, like that's helpful because still, even in fiction writing, I'll be making a character and I'm like, I wonder if the real life person I'm basing this off of will realize how obviously they're like this character. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. So one random cultural reference off of what Mackenzie just said, and then I have a follow-up question. So there's this movie that I really enjoyed when I was younger on Disney Channel called Read It and Weep. It featured both of the Panabaker sisters.
Yes.
And basically it's the story of a girl who writes about all of the problematic stuff that happens in her high school, but everybody's like in a magical world. So some person is a troll, etc. And she accidentally submits her journal in a writing contest. And then it's like, oh, wait. And then they realized that it was her journal talking about everybody in the school. So I don't know. It's connected to this because you mentioned that you changed names, Travis. So I was just sort of like, wow.
I'm going to have to go watch that after this.
I love that movie.
Isn't it so good? I haven't seen it in so long. Now I need to see it again. But the point is like, it really is interesting, like how you navigate that line between like acknowledging that real people influence you in this way, but also honoring their privacy, etc. So I think my follow-up question would be, I mean, you guys in many ways live and breathe your genre because you are the main characters of your story, because you are memoirists. But have there been any particular memoirs or memoirists that have inspired you that you used as like book models and things of that nature?
For me, I kind of wanted to do something that I hadn't seen before. So I took a little bit, like I read Russell Brand's memoir before I wrote mine because it was also recovery based. And so just to get a feel for, okay, what could this look like, but not necessarily what I want mine to reflect or what I want mine to be. I also read A Dog's Purpose too, because like I said, I wove the story of my rescue dog into it. So I wanted readers to also pick up on that and really be able to say, okay, if I have nothing related to recovery, I can still grab this part of the book and this will still touch me. I'll still finish the book. I'll go cover to cover because I love the other story, not necessarily my story. And that was just the way I approached it.
I like didn't have, it's weird. Like I'm trying to remember like from my book models, like I used a lot of my book novels were like start with why. It was like kind of like more like nonfiction. I kind of took inspiration from nonfiction and fiction, like kind of to help me because I was doing like a really unique blend. But yeah, like one memoir that I read that kind of tackled like, again, like a very traumatic turn in their lives and was very like transformative was and why am I blanking out on the name of it, but it's Dan Harris's memoir from Good Morning America. Dan Harris, yeah. I'm blanking out on the name of it. I don't know why, but it's very good. And I like the structure of it and the flow, and his honesty was like a mature bluntness. Like it was a way to be very blunt and sincere without being like swearing all the time or, super negative. It was definitely a really unique spin and very like, and also not super positive, like Sunshine and Rainbows. It was a very like genuine, like very grounding, truthful like story. And I think I followed his intention a lot, which is how he wrote it. So
while we're on the subject of models and resources, what are some of your favorite resources for finding new readers and or engaging with your community?
So for me, it's engaging in speaking events. For example, I'm speaking at our state capitol in about 2 weeks at a recovery alignment, function. It's going to be incredible. There's expected attendance is over 5,000 people, so we'll see if they hit that mark. But and I've carved out a little piece where I get to go up there and talk about my story and my book. So that should be awesome. And definitely a way to connect with the community, give back, since I'm located in Madison and that's our capital. So aside from that, for me, it's reaching out to different groups on Facebook. Facebook has been huge in terms of just supporting my work and really adding readers. So I look for recovery groups on Facebook and then pursued them. Went on, I can't tell you how many different podcasts, and just told my story, told anything they wanted to know. I was basically, forgive me, but an open book. And I said, okay, let's do it. Let's talk about it. And I think that was a really good way to grow my brand, by just being that transparent and just seeking any opportunity I could find and getting it out there and getting more people to talk about it.
Yeah,
I enjoyed that book pun. Thank you, Travis.
You're welcome.
I found the same thing. Yeah, like speaking events. I found that to be, I just found like for memoirs, like it's nice to meet the person. Like, I don't know, like I think like a lot of people feel like special. Like, oh my gosh, I got to meet an author. Like when they like meet you and come up to you and see that like, oh, I'm this young, or like, oh, like I'm, just this is just me, how personable,
A real person.
I was like, yeah, like they're not afraid to come up to me. And that's, that's why they are open and honest and share like very deep personal stuff of like us. And so I found like just those one-on-one connections, like was kind of like, it was like a game of telephone. Like it just was constantly like the next person, one person would talk to me and they would just continue to be like, hey, have you checked out Nicole's book? Like I was at this talk, like they would kind of like pass along my Amazon, or like book link. They would constantly like pass it around. And so I think just because they had very genuine like conversations with me, just saw how approachable I was, and I made myself available. I think that was like another big thing is I definitely, and I definitely strive to do more in person. I think the timing of my book launch was good because it was like 2020, like beginning of 2021. So there was like a little bit more like, okay, we're going to try and experiment with in person. And there was a lot of hybrid stuff. So that I think really helped me to get a good mix. Not only reach out to my local community, like one-on-one, but also like reach broader audiences domestically and globally as well. So, but I found like making myself available and present, I think was a huge factor.
You were already so vulnerable in writing the book. Why stop there?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I have a quick follow-up question, because again, we're talking about vulnerability and the ways in which, because you are in many ways the subject matter of your book, when people actually come to meet you, this is okay. Maybe I'm confessing this on behalf of being an author, right? Like as somebody who works in fiction, predominantly dystopian fiction, some people are air quote disappointed, not actually, when they meet me, because like apparently my personality does not match what I write at all. But I guess like, do you ever, I don't want to ask like if you guys ever wonder or feel insecure about this, but it's more like, do you feel that what you write is such an extension of you that people wouldn't make any false assumptions about who you are? Like, do you feel like you as a person, like personality and all, are reflected in your writing?
Yeah. I think I view it as an extension of myself. It is who I am, like writing as a passion of mine. But yeah, like, I mean, and that was the other thing, like with my first book. Yeah. Like, I mean, a lot of my immediate family and friends, like who were with me through that whole 10 years, like knew all about it. But then it's like, when I did speaking events, when I met more people, yeah, they kind of did a double take and they were like, you're mature enough to like write about this. Like they were like, again, like they were amazed. They kind of couldn't believe that, like, you know, this happened to me. Like it kind of, you know, and I think it further drives the fact that, yeah, like anyone can write a memoir. Like if you have a story, tell it. But I definitely know, yeah, some people were very surprised when, you know, I kind of, you know, shared my elevator pitch and like, yeah, like, I mean, I had, you know, I did this, I attended here, blah, 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 blah. But I had a lot of like major life altering changes in my life and, you know, derailments, and then kind of dropping the bomb, you know, of like kind of what I went through. I mean, a lot of jaws dropped because they could, you know, they would never imagine a million years. Like, that's why you just can't assume about anything. You know, you can't assume or make assumptions about people's stories because you never know, you know, even just walking on the street, you never know if somebody just had a loved one pass away or they lost their job or anything like that. You can't make any assumptions like that, even for authors too.
I want to keep riding this wisdom train and ask you guys our final question and remind the audience that they can ask a question in the chat. Do you have any final parting words of wisdom for people watching, aspiring memoirists, aspiring authors?
I do right away. So if there's something that draws an emotion in you, I would say lean into that in your writing. Like, just really take it and run with it, because what I found was the stories that resonated the most with my readers were some of the most personal, the most challenging ones that I was almost hesitant to put in the book. I was like, ooh, is this too much? Does this go too far? And the answer was no. It wasn't too much. It was just enough that people were able to say, okay, this makes you relatable. This makes me want to read more. And for me, so those moments where I felt insecure or I felt unsure, instead of shying away from it, leaning into it and really just kind of running with the point made all the difference in my book.
The piece of wisdom that I would share, which is something I did not like realize till after I published my first book, like it just didn't like click for me. But you know, like you know, it kind of goes back to the audience piece. Like, you know, you write this book and you're just like, you know, scraping like the bowl, like, okay, like who can I write this for? Like, I'm trying to figure out like who my audience is, like who the heck is going to read it, you know, and you're writing it and, you know, you're debating on, you know, you're pouring your heart and soul into the story. There's tears, there's sweat, there's, you know, joy. But at the end of the day, you know, I kind of came to the realization, I hope other memoirists and even other authors feel this way, but like at the end of the day, sometimes the person that needs to read your book the most is yourself. Yeah. So it's like like for me, it was very, yeah. Like, I mean, it just, for me though, like even though I already wrote about it in journal format, writing it in a different, different way and seeing it like tangible in front of me, like it kind of was like, wow, like, yeah, I don't care if anyone didn't read it besides me and my parents. I don't even care if my parents liked it. I just wrote it for myself. And I think having that intention, I think, was kind of what, again, goes back to the genuine piece, the authenticity, and, you know, branding ourselves as who we are.
That's so good. This has been such a great chat, you guys. I want to thank you again so much for your time today and for taking the time to talk with us and to the audience about writing a memoir.
Yeah, I mean, it's been an absolute pleasure to have both of you. And I mean, I learned so much from both of you every time we have the opportunity, the privilege of talking to you. So again, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you again for having us. I mean, I had a great time, and yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys so much.
Oh. There we go. What a great time today. I learned a lot about memoir writing today that I hadn't even like considered, truthfully.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that again, like all of us as authors, there is this weird sense of knowing that a book has emerged through you, but memoirists are called to a different caliber of vulnerability because their subject matter is themselves. So it was really interesting to learn about how they navigate that terrain of vulnerability while still like protecting themselves and the people that they love. So that was really cool. That was so cool. And with that in mind, thank you guys so much for joining us for Coffee Chats today. We're gonna be around for a while, okay? So if there's anything in particular that you want to have a hot beverage and watch or participate alongside us in, suggest a topic in the comments below. We do check them, we do engage with them. We've actually pulled a couple of ideas from these comments, so please leave whatever you would like. Next week, we're actually going to be talking with a couple of people who are particularly passionate about books for young readers. So we have one person who specializes in reading young books for young readers, even though she's a new mom herself, and two authors who wrote books for young readers, and how really, even if it's geared towards a younger audience, it could be accessible and loved by all. Like Harry Potter
That's gonna be
or
so
Percy
fun.
Jackson.
Yes.
Right? I'm so excited.
I got really excited for the casting announcement for Percy Jackson the other day.
Right? I'm like, wow, look at the age appropriate selection.
It's going to be so good.
It's going to be so good. But again, thank you all so much for joining us. And, you know, I hope you're enjoying your beverage of choice somewhere out in the world.
See you next
time.
time.
Bye, beautiful people.